Good afternoon, everyone. It is me, Angie, and I'm accompanied today by Oswald, the Greyhorn Owl. And sort of keeping in theme with the book we read yesterday called Luck, about a crane and that crane's interaction with a human, got me thinking about taming, imprinting, habituation, and all of those things that kind of happen with wild animals. So if you've ever seen a raptor demo, you've probably heard me talk about Oswald and the fact that Oswald is a captive raptor, not because he has a physical injury, but because he is what we call an imprint. So what is imprinting? Imprinting is actually something that is normal and natural, and it is supposed to happen. It's something that happens for most species of birds. Every species, it happens a little bit different time, and the amount of time that it takes to sort of settle in is different for every species. But generally speaking, imprinting is learning that happens during a very specific time period that it's very definite. It is not something that you can change or avoid, and it is learning that happens without any kind of reward or reinforcement. I think Oswald agrees. So when you think about when we train a dog to do something, like when we train a dog to do a trick, we use reinforcement. And so that's giving them a treat when they do something good. And that's what we call positive reinforcement. There's also negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is when something bad happens and you get punished for it. So there's positive and negative reinforcement, but when we're talking about imprinting, there's no reinforcement at all whatsoever. Imprinting is very, very rapid. Usually it happens in just a few weeks. And it's irreversible. So once an animal imprints, it's set, it's done, and there really isn't anything that we can do to change it or fix it or reverse it. The one thing that's pretty much standard when it comes to imprinting is it happens after the animal can see, but it happens before the animal experiences what we call a fear reaction. And that kind of makes sense. So you can't really imprint on something that you can't see. And if you have a fear reaction, when we talk about it in a wild animal, usually what that reaction is, the most simple, basic kind of definition, is just that you're going to avoid anything that is bigger than you. All right. So when imprinting happens, it's usually the baby animal looks to its parent and it decides, like, if the little brain goes, yep, that is my parent, I'm going to follow it, I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to learn the basics of what I need to know to survive. Another thing that it does is it kind of teaches that baby brain to recognize a species. And so it helps the baby animal say, ah, yes, this is what I am. I'm one of those. And one of those is what I'm going to choose to mate with and do all those sorts of things. And anything that's not one of those is something that I'm just not going to, spend any time with. So that's imprinting. And when it happens, normally in nature, it's a very good thing. Now, there's two other things that can happen, and that is habituation and taming. And so a lot of times at the Science Center, we get asked about our snakes. Do we tame them? Have we trained them to be gentle, calm, and kind, and all of those things? And technically, the answer would be no. We didn't tame them, we didn't train them. What we have done is we have habituated them. So habituation is really just learning not to react to a stimuli, and a stimuli is just something that happens. So basically, when you are habituating an animal or something like that, the fear reaction, which is avoiding anything bigger and scarier than you, that fear reaction is diminished. In another sense, humans, we experience habituation as well. So, like, for instance, a person who maybe lives next to a train station or an airport or a bus line, you know, after a while, all that traffic, you just sort of stop hearing it. And that's your brain becoming habituated to that noise. You're not reacting to that noise anymore. And so habituation can lead to things like taming. And so where imprinting is learning that happens without any kind of reward or reinforcement, training is when you do use rewards and reinforcements to get a response. So again, like when we talk about dogs and pets and things like that, when they do something good, we give them a treat. If they do something bad, we'll often use negative reinforcement to get them to avoid that. That's right, sir. So when Oswald was a very young baby, just a few days old, he was brought home to live with humans, some humans who perhaps didn't really understand habituation and imprinting and all those sorts of things. And so during that very critical time when Oswald should have been looking to other great horned owls, he was looking at people. And so as far as his wonderful little owl brain is concerned, we are all the same species. And so he's going to look to us for things like security, mating, all of those sorts of things. All right, so anything else? I feel like that was super fast.
Well, and I think just talking about what happens in the book, that would be
right. Okay, so this book starts out right away with a young crane who has one of those plastic 6-pack rings stuck around its neck, and a young human helps this young bird. She takes the 6-pack ring off of his neck and sort of saves his life, and then this young bird goes off through migration with his parents. And through the book, it talks about the parents are memorizing the mountains and the rivers and all of these landmarks to sort of get them where they're going and get back home. Meanwhile, the bird is actually thinking about the human's face and the roads and the windmills and more human objects than perhaps the other cranes are looking at. And in this book, everything kind of turns out good for this young baby. Many times, however, when it comes to things like habituation and imprinting, it usually doesn't turn out very good. Usually the birds are going to end up more like Oswald, totally unable to care for themselves. In fact, I think in this book, the main character, Luck, if it weren't for his mate that he found, he would not have survived. Lucky for him, the mate knew its way around and it was able to find him. Yeah, I really enjoyed this book. It is getting to be migration season. Migration is upon us any day now, which also means probably any minute we're going to start getting calls here at the Science Center. I found a bird, it doesn't look right, these sorts of things.
It's already happening.
Yep. And so first and foremost, we absolutely love that you guys are looking out for nature and wanting to do the right thing, want to help and make sure everybody makes it where they need to go. But it's important to remember that none of us here have a rehabilitation permit. We are not legally allowed to rehabilitate any animals here. The best thing that we do, what we usually do, is we just sort of kind of run middleman and we connect people who know of or have seen an injured animal, try to get them to different places who can give them the right advice, who can give them transport and things like that. So yes, you definitely can give us a call if you find an injured bird, but we're not going to be able to do anything directly. You can also chat with your local DNR, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Those guys also have, there's a list that they have of people who can help. Oswald agrees. One thing that is sometimes difficult for people to kind of come to terms with is nature usually has it handled. Very oftentimes when we are feeling like this animal's in trouble and I need to help it, many times the animal's going to be able to figure it out on its own and it'll be fine. Yeah.
So can an animal we talked about imprinting and habituation and taming as separate things. Can an animal end up being many of those things, all of those things?
Sure. Yep. So usually what happens is it starts out with habituation. An animal is in proximity to people and it loses that fear, especially those of us who live in town. If you've ever tried to have lunch out by the lakeside and you are accosted by different gulls trying to get your food and kind of harassing you, maybe even swooping down and stealing your stuff, those animals are totally habituated. They have lost almost all of their fear towards humans, and it can get kind of annoying. Once you get an animal habituated, so that animal is not really scared of people, then you can start taming it. Now, if it's a wild animal, you definitely, absolutely do not want to intentionally habituate or tame a wild animal. That is literally illegal. Please don't do that. But yeah, so habituation will often lead into taming. Imprinting, like I said, imprinting is going to happen. It's more a matter of what it imprints on. So if there's human interaction, or like if we're meddling, then that imprinting might happen on an improper species.
So like with Oswald, he's imprinted on humans, but he's also been habituated to be in the context that he's living in.
Right. And the habituation sort of varies. Like, he's very habituated to me.
Yeah.
And to get to this point, we took baby steps. And so what I would do is I would just go in, not even into his cage, I would just stand near his cage, and so he could just like get used to my body shape and the sound of my heart and breath and all that kind of stuff. And then I would go sit in his cage. I wouldn't do anything. I just brought a book. Sometimes I would sketch or whatever. And then you just kind of slowly extend that time. And then we brought food in and all of those little things. And so I guess once I started bringing food, we moved from habituation into taming. And so the reason he sits on my glove is because he is assuming that when we're done, he's going to get fed. And so that would be an example of taming to a certain extent.
Yeah, so Angie and Oswald have a very different relationship to me and Oswald.
Yes. Yep.
Different habituation there.
Mm-hmm. And, even his habituation to our longtime volunteer, Amy, is much different. She's been working with him a lot longer, and his reaction to her is much different than it is to me.
This one kind of unrelated thing is Oswald's been looking a little rough around the edges lately.
Yes.
What's going on there?
So it's fall. We're getting ready for migration, and so when you're getting ready for that big long trip, it's good to have fresh, brand new feathers. So Oswald is molting, which is when the old feathers come out, just one or two, a few at a time, and then they're replaced. And I don't know if you can see his feet, but his little feet are molting as well, and so we just got like little bald spots, little tiny feathers coming out. He has itty bitty feathers on his eyelids, and so when those fall out, kind of cute, kind of pretty. But yeah, while it's happening, he looks kind of rugged. He looks kind of rough.
You can see when he is hooting too, you can see a bald spot on his neck.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if you look kind of right back here, it's a little sparse. Sorry, buddy. That was an improper placement of my hands. So yeah, most, probably all birds molt. They don't all molt at the exact same time, but spring and fall are pretty common.
This maybe is also going into something that comes up in the book too, with the young sandhill crane noticing that he looks different than his parents.
That's right. Yep. So Oswald's pretty old. He probably doesn't have any like juvenile feathers or anything like that.
But it is relevant for O'Reilly, right? Like, we know how old O'Reilly is because...
Yep. So the first about year or so of a red-tailed hawk's life, their plumage looks different. And a lot of birds actually have different juvenile, which, baby bird plumage colors versus adult. Bald eagles are a good example. They're sort of a mottled brown until they hit they're usually about 5 years old when a bald eagle gets its white head and its white tail. A red-tailed hawk doesn't get its red tail until about the first year, and their speckles look a little different. I'm not sure if Greyhorn owls have like a different juvenile color.
When they're really young, they're like gray, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean when they're still like
When they're still like
the
fluffy.
the weird when they're in like that alien stage where they're all legs and eyeballs.
Yeah. All right. Well, when are
All
we
right.
open, Angie?
We are open 7 days a week, Monday through Saturday, 9:30 to 5. Sundays we are open 1 to 5. Is there anything else going on?
Really?
Nothing
If
special.
you're looking to visit the Science Center at a time when it's not very busy, this is the time of year to do it. After when school gets started, that tends to be our slowest time. So if you're someone who's trying to dodge the crowds coming in, this is absolutely the time of year to come in and visit.
Yep, for sure. If you're a teacher and you schedule a field trip during this time of year, I think you get a discount, which is great because I'm not gonna lie, it gets a little boring in the fall when it's quiet like this until 4 o'clock when everybody gets out of school. All right, well, if there's nothing else, as always, thank you so much for tuning in. Follow us on all of our different media channels, Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, Instagram. I think we're Headwaters Science Center at all of them.
Headwaters Science CTR on Facebook, but
I changed it.
Oh, you did?
Yep.
Great.
Yep. So I think so, and if not, it's pretty close to that. So on behalf of myself and Ryan and Oswald.